Are corporates renouncing shareholder capitalism and moving towards stakeholder capitalism? Maximizing shareholder value has been the motto all along for most corporates, as organizations focus on profits and share prices, regardless of the consequences to other stakeholders like community, customers, labor force, suppliers and others. Stakeholder capitalism, a neologism coined by Edward Freeman, is a version of capitalism based on free will and guided by practical experience and observation rather than theory or thoughts. The term stakeholder was used to represent individuals who can affect or be affected as a result of organization attaining their objectives. Shareholders, employees, customers, suppliers, lenders, and society were considered as stakeholders, and balancing the influence of these stakeholders to satisfy the goals of an organization forms the crux of stakeholder theory. The primary focus is on interrelationships between stakeholders working together to achieve a common goal, creating value in a manner that one's right does not outclass another's. Although stakeholders intend only their own gain, an invisible hand as postulated by Adam Smith promotes a beneficial outcome which was no part of his intention. Freeman identifies 5 narratives of capitalism which prevailed in the world for a reasonable amount of time due to economic conditions in its time. Labor capitalism. Karl Marx was the earliest proponent of class relations that eventually gave way to a capitalist economy. Marx has emphasized that society is basically divided into capitalist and labor classes, and the premise of capitalism is labor and capital are at crossroads due to fixed resources of productive assets. The opposing nature of capitalist and the laborer leads to a permanently anxious labor class, and eventually labor class is entitled to take over the capital resources by aggression. Keynes hypothesized that building a better society was beyond the reach of individuals. He emphasized that government with its powers would be able to bring about the necessary changes, and therefore government is the most powerful stakeholder, superseding all other stakeholders, and the ensuing capitalism to be managed by the government. Welfare state is a variation of government capitalism. Government is the dominant stakeholder and engages with consumers, investors and labor forces, a characteristic feature of government capitalism. Milton Friedman advocated economic freedom for shareholders along with a limited role of government, and that increasing investor wealth or value is the function of capitalist system. According to Friedman, shareholders who are better off have higher investing power and bring about better outcomes of all stakeholders involved. He also argues that social responsibility is an obstacle to the investors' concerns by limiting the ability to create wealth. Welfare of customers, community, or charity is seen as antagonistic to the primary goal of increasing shareholder value. Ballantine, Burrell and Means posited that traditional economic theory does not completely consider ownership and managers of the organization as stakeholders. They argue that responsibility and control to be in the hands of the management rather than investor to ensure a neutral organization, making them the dominant stakeholder. Schumpeter, Kirzner and Baumol argue that within the capitalist system, entrepreneur is the key player. They posit that an entrepreneur disrupts the existing market to create a newer one, and the interests of entrepreneur take precedence over the interests of other stakeholders. The assumptions about markets are similar in all of the 5 narratives. Self-interest that is unrelated to other market participants or unheeded, dissociation of morality from prosperity, and zero-sum game of resources are the 3 assumptions. These assumptions result in 4 problems with the 5 models of capitalism mentioned. Problem of competition. Other individuals are seen as a threat instead of partnering with them for value creation. Problems of business ethics. separating capitalism from ethics by developing another set of norms, rules, and morals for business and not integrating moral aspects, like agreements, trust, honesty, which are essential for a sustainable organization, is described as separation fallacy. Problem of the dominating actor. Each group, either labor, government, investors, or managers, assumes that their rights overshadows the rights of others, and the rest of the organization should cater to the needs of the major group, that will eventually result into conflicts. Keeping long-term aspects of business, competition, ethics, and dominating actors depend on government to resolve these problems through mandates on business, organizations, and individuals. A paradoxical situation in liberal democracy arises when the government resort to redistributing resources. It ends up with the problem of a dominating actor and a vicious cycle ensues. Freeman proposes that stakeholder capitalism can resolve these problems through the principles of stakeholder cooperation, stakeholder engagement, stakeholder responsibility, complexity, continuous creation, and emergent competition. Although socialism shaped the principal economic and social structure of India for nearly 4 decades after gaining independence, India moved towards a more market-based economy towards the end of 20th century. Changes in consumption behavior, advances in technology has forced industrial sector to introspect who are their stakeholders. There will always exist a small group which will pursue only their self-interest even at their expense. Growing exposure frauds have revived the interest and need of stakeholder capitalism, especially creation of new sources of value through morals, relationships, teams, trust, honesty, and care, which are essential for a sustainable organization. We offered the inclusion of 7th principle through stakeholder capitalism, the principle of stakeholder communication. It draws attention to consistent and periodic disclosure of the current state of meeting the needs of multiple stakeholders such as customers, suppliers, communities, employees, and financiers. Transparency and communicating regularly to stakeholders can make the difference and offer the necessary checks and balances required to exercise prudent choices. Thank you for your attention.